Hi, I'm Autumn,
And I'm Laura.
and together we're the Boo
Boo
Sisters.
Sisters.
Okay, happy Valentine's Day week, everybody. 'Tis the season of love.
Yep. The most important type of love is self-love. So even if you don't have a significant other, hopefully you're doing something nice for yourself this week.
Great little self-help tip there, Laura. I like it.
Or if you have a puppy, do something nice for your puppy. Have a
Oh,
Valentine puppy day.
my local bakery makes like little heart cookies for dogs.
I was gonna
Not,
say, is this for humans or for
no,
dogs?
I mean, not even just for Valentine's Day, just come get a cookie for your dog any day.
I like the places that hand out the treats too when you go through
Yeah,
drive-throughs and things, like how Starbucks does a pup cup.
I've never actually done that because I don't think I've gone to Starbucks with waffles.
Interesting. You should do it.
My dog is named Waffles, and he is a little Spitfire Bichon Shih Tzu mix.
That's a lot of mixes.
And no one really loves him but me because has such an attitude.
He's definitely a stinker, your dog. And I love all dogs, and I'm saying that. So that means something.
Yeah, true. But you still love him because
My
he's your
dog
nephew.
is Abby. She is a Cocker Spaniel, beautiful dark brown color, and she is now 11 years old. So,
Wow, time flies.
yep,
11.
she's been with me a while since she was a little ball of fluff that would sit on my shoulder.
Well, this
She
week,
is my true love for sure.
oh, when this episode airs, we'll post a photo of our dogs to introduce the Boo Sisters
People
puppies.
will be
That
like,
would be cute.
what is this?
No, we'll be like, if you listen to our episode, you'll know why we're posting our fuzzball faces. Here they are.
We could say there are boos.
Aw, that's cute. Our Boo faces.
Or
Aw.
just boos.
But I literally call Waffles Boo Bear.
Well, it's because he's a little white dog. He looks like a little ghost,
Come here, Boo Bear. He's
like a
so
little grumpy old
cute.
man ghost.
This episode, though, is not about dogs and it's not about aliens. But I did want to talk about aliens for a minute because have you seen from December? So I guess it's about a month and a half, 2 months ago, all the news out of New Jersey about the drones.
Yes, I have. And I watched the Project Fear documentary, is what I want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, I watched that as well. What did you think?
Are you asking me what I think that the lights and things are? Because I feel like that's an hour conversation in and of itself.
Yeah, I actually want to know what you think it is and also what you thought of their documentary.
Okay, well, I really liked the documentary. I thought it was super well done. I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't catch more or that some of their footage was more, even they said it themselves, it was a little bit more unpolished than their normal stuff, and that they were getting
Mhm.
all of this electronic interference and feedback, and things were happening that kept them from really recording quality material.
Right. I thought they did a really good job actually for just being out there 3 nights in what they recorded. They also had bad weather, which is never
Hmm.
good for sky gazing. Um, but I thought it's worth watching. If people out there haven't watched it yet, I think it's worth watching.
I thought he gives a lot of really solid information in the beginning of the show about the different theories of what these lights could be and how long in history they just didn't start right now, like
Hmm.
people think.
Right. And it's still happening today, but it also started years and years ago. So, what's your theory on what it might be?
I think in general, most of what people are seeing, especially over land, I think are manned manned drones or potentially aircraft from government facilities that people don't automatically recognize or that don't show up on the radar. Because we're used to seeing normal planes in the sky doesn't mean that all planes will look the same or sound the same. Some are going to be flying lower and have different lights, even with the regulations on the lights on the planes. And then I think with the hysteria that was caused by the initial sightings, a bunch of people started putting their own private drones up into the sky, which created more sightings and people thinking that they were seeing more lights.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think there's a separate situation going on over the ocean and maybe even in the ocean that could actually be something unexplained and paranormal extraterrestrial, because the lights blinking out from existence and moving really fast and some of the weird jellyfish like shapes and things that have been seen are
Mm-hmm.
super intriguing.
I agree. I kind of had the same theory that some of the drone footage that has been caught, it's kind of super obvious to me that it looks like military type airplane drones. And I'm just wondering if there's been an increase of military drones due to a potential increase in unexplained phenomenon of, oh, what is this? The government is saying we have to go observe it. But I think maybe it's increasing together.
And then when the military sends up their crafts, people see more things in the sky, and then everybody sends up their personal crafts.
Right. So it just gets more and more and more. President Trump, before he took office back in December, early January, told the public that he had no clue what was happening with the drones, but that on his first day in office, he would figure it out and release the information to the public, which would be super cool if that were to happen. But as of yet, we've not heard anything about the drones from
Which is
Trump.
interesting.
Right? So what's happening there? But moreover, James, my husband, he's so funny. I was talking to him about this and was like, I hope we really get information on the drones. And he said, listen, this is what you should do. You should create a anonymous X account and it simply be dedicated to pressuring Trump to release drone information.
Oh my gosh, that would
Like
be
every
great.
hour, be like, at President Trump, how about the drones? At President Trump, we haven't heard about the drones. At President Trump, we're still here waiting for the drone information.
Yeah.
Like, and just keep like bugging him about it. And that be our sole purpose in life is to, I don't know what you call them anymore. They're not tweets, are they? But tweet President Trump until we get some drone information.
That's hilarious. I love the idea, and I hope that maybe somebody listening will do it.
Someone get on it. But that brings me to last season, we kind of teased people, Laura, about
Mhm.
a unexplained flying object that you and I saw when we were kids. What were we? Was I maybe 12?
And I was about 9.
Yeah. And we were selling door to door. Back then, you could sell door to door stuff. It was the great 90s, right? So you could
Completely
sell.
unchaperoned. You
Right.
just had a magazine and a wad of cash from people. No, just kidding.
Basically, but we would go around our neighborhood, right? And Girl Scouts did this too with cookies. It wasn't uncommon. We were going door to door with this magazine, and if we sold a certain number of things, we would get to pick prizes, cool prizes that we would get. Um, and so we would literally go door to door, and neighbors would be like, "Oh, come in. Like, let's flip through your magazine." And now I look at that, and we could have easily been serial killed.
Or just kidnapped or fed poisonous cookies or something.
Right. So dangerous. But back then it was like just neighbors being friendly. Anyway, that was a sidebar. So we're out selling this magazine, and it's probably getting close to dinner time. So
Mhm.
maybe close to dusk, but still very bright outside. Is that how you remember it?
I thought it was definitely dusky, like that type of blue sky that still
Hmm.
has the last rays of sunlight, but the sun has already dipped beyond the horizon. So the stars are starting to almost come out on the very edge of the one side of the sky.
Hmm. So shiny things are easier to see in the sky.
Yes. Hmm.
And we lived in a small town in Utah, and I don't feel like there was a lot of flying traffic at all. Now, where I live in Virginia, there's planes everywhere, every minute when I look up in the sky. But where we were, I feel like wasn't on a very strong flight path. So seeing an airplane even overhead was, oh, let's watch this airplane for a while, right? That's
Hmm.
how I remember it. So we're just walking to the next house and I look up in the sky and see this shiny object, probably right overhead, 12 o'clock. And for whatever reason, it looked strange to me. And right now, I don't know why it looked strange right off the bat, but something was different. It didn't have the feel of an airplane. And I said to you, Laura, I said, look at that airplane.
Hmm. As I recall, it only had the one sort of sparkling, almost white light or white blue light. It didn't have any red or any yellow or any other color, green, anything like that. Is that how you
Hmm.
remember it too?
Yeah, it wasn't blinking like
Hmm.
other lights had. It was just a bright light. And back then, satellites were rare, but I did know that there was satellites. So maybe I was just thinking, oh, it could be a satellite or it could be something else because we hardly see anything in the sky. But we were both watching for a good 30 seconds or so, watching this thing move across the sky at the pace of an airplane
Hmm.
would, so pretty slowly. And then all of a sudden, it sped up to a rocket pace, made a direct 90-degree angle at that same crazy fast pace, and then disappeared.
Hmm.
That's how I remember it
Yeah, I remember it the same way, almost like a lightning bolt. Like it was going in one direction, then made a 90 degree and then shot off.
and was gone.
Right.
And
Like in
I
the
don't,
in this just a couple seconds. Like it had taken that 30 seconds for it to cross, part of the sky. And then in two, it was gone.
right. So then afterwards, I feel we both looked at each other and knew it was weird. Did we go home and tell mom or dad?
Yeah, I remember saying to each other, what was that? And we were like, I don't know what that was. And we did go and we told somebody. I don't remember. I want to say it was dad because of the history of him telling us about his paranormal experiences.
I think he blew it off, or whoever we told was like, oh, okay, like whatever.
Well, then it was probably mom.
I feel like it wasn't a big deal. Whoever we told it wasn't a big deal, and we kind of shrugged it off, but then continued to talk about it and obviously feel differently that it should be a big deal.
I think
So,
it's one of those things where you have to be there. And when it's a kid coming back to you and telling you a story, even a kid that's almost a teenager, you think, oh, you must have not been looking at it right, or something else happened. Like it was a shooting star and your mind just played a trick on you or something.
right. But since we both had the same exact experience, it was just something I'll hold on to my whole life. That's for sure. I think, and all those people in New Jersey, when they're seeing something unusual or something they know cannot physically be a plane or even a man flown drone, those are very static memories that linger for the rest of your life.
Agreed. And speaking of things that linger for the rest of your life, nothing lingers like tragic love.
Yes, all the makings of great ghost stories are in love and
Heartbreak.
yep. So we're going to get on with our stories after sharing our alien story with you.
I'm excited to hear your tragic love story. Not your
Okay.
personal tragic love story, just
Well, we all have lots of those that we could share, I'm sure.
we're not that type of podcast.
Okay, so my story takes place in New York City, Brooklyn.
I have to stop you
Okay,
because my story takes place in New York,
what are the chances?
but it's not Brooklyn. So I think we're safe when we didn't do the same one.
Okay, good. I'm in a New York state of mind. This is going to
Yep.
be our singing episode.
No, no, there's no musical episode here. I
No,
hate those episodes.
you hate those episodes. We've never done a musical episode.
No,
This is
like
our
every
first time.
series in the history of series, like TV series, always has a musical
Oh,
episode
has a
and it's
musical.
always horrible. Don't
Okay,
do it.
Friends didn't have a musical episode.
Because they were a sitcom. It has to be something that it doesn't pair with normally. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer had a musical episode.
Yeah, that was crazy. Okay, here we go. Melrose Hall was built in Brooklyn in 1749. That is older than our nation. To truly picture this house, you have to transport yourself from the current concrete jungle vision you have of Brooklyn into a quaint countryside. The house was located on a grand country estate of 20 acres, covered in gardens and trees. The house stood at the end of a double row of pines. It stood 2 stories high, with wings on either side. In those days, the finest country home in the state. The great double oaken door led into an immense hall, taking up the entire length of the depth of the main house. It was wainscoted in dark oak, the polished floor covered with rich Persian rugs, bear, tiger, and lion skins, and the walls were hung with paintings by old masters. While in the center is a fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox. To the left, a broad mahogany staircase leads to the rooms above. This was certainly not the bustling street corner that it is today. So upstairs had the main guest and living quarters for the family. There was one attic apartment that was built above the ballroom that was only lit by 2 diamond-shaped stained glass windows. And this dark and isolating room is where our story will take place.
That paints a picture. I love stained glass. But
So
above
this,
a ballroom was the
yes.
attic.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so to give you a little bit more history of this house, it was built by this gentleman, his last name was Lane, who was partier back in the day. And people really didn't know his story, but the house was built with a lot of hidden staircases and corridors, like a small version of the Winchester Manor. It had weird staircases, doors that led to nowhere, corridors, rooms that were hidden, secret chambers, all this weird stuff that was only discovered really when they were taking the house apart, which I'll get to later. This attic room above the ballroom was situated in a way in the house under the gables that you didn't really know that there was going to be a room there. And the only door to a staircase that led to the secret room was in the ballroom that during the time of this story was hidden behind a gigantic painting.
I love secret doors. And I can just see what you're describing. You normally think of an attic room as small. Was it as big as the ballroom below it?
That's in my vision from what I read, what I'm gathering, because I
Mm.
think this room was actually pretty lavish. There are several accounts of this story. The account that I'm going to share is one of the oldest written accounts that was formally shared in an 1895 article in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Colonel William Axtell was the second son of an English nobleman. William himself was a bit of a party animal, just like Lane was, the previous owner, and he was also a very strong drinker. In his youth, he was called William the Gay, and his other nickname was the Three Bottle Man. What were your nicknames in college, Laura?
In college, I didn't really have any, but in high school, I had a C frat and Utah
Utah? That's
because I was
cute.
from Utah and Sherlock. Those were my three.
Well, that's better than Three Bottle Man.
That seems like a boast more than a teasing him in a negative way.
Like, wow, he can drink 3 bottles? Man.
Or, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he cleaned himself up and he married extremely well to the daughter of a wealthy British merchant, Margaretta. She was beautiful and educated and accomplished. As the Revolutionary War started, William felt pulled by his loyalist upbringings and strong British family ties. He also thought the colonists would lose, and he wanted to, of course, be on the winning side. He soon became a colonel and a commander of a loyalist regiment called the Nassau Blues, comprised of 30 men from Nassau County, Long Island, Brooklyn, and Queens. After winning the Battle of Brooklyn, the British occupied Brooklyn and New York until the end of the war. So naturally, Colonel Axtell hosts these grand balls and parties for his loyalist friends to toast King George. But what was not well known until later was that below these parties was a chamber for torturing and imprisoning colonists who sided with patriots. His regiment soon got the name the Nasty Blues for their cruelty and sadism. In fact, after the war, Melrose Hall was on an official short list of estates that would be confiscated by the new government due to the nature of what had gone on there during the war. I'm telling you this to paint a little picture of what kind of fellow William Axtell was. We could go on about the Revolutionary War and treatment on both sides, but this is Valentine's Day. We're going to go into the love story part of this. Back to his wife, Margareta. As I mentioned before, she was perfect in every way, except she was not her sister.
Oh my gosh. We're doing a sister love triangle story.
So,
It's really
Will,
good. Neither of us would go for the type of guy that the other one likes. We never like
true.
would have this problem ever.
That's true. And nowhere in this story could I find, okay, how did this initially happen? Was William first like, oh, I really love this sister? Was the sister like jealous of the sister and tried to get her husband? Who knows? But the big point of this is that William wasn't in love with Margareta. He was in love with her sister, Isabella. I want to note here that other accounts of this story say that the woman who William was actually in love with was not Margareta's sister, but instead an Iroquois princess. And other accounts say that the woman was not either, but was actually a slave or another woman of color. And yet, still another account I read said that Isabella, Margareta's sister, would actually dress as a quote, Indian squaw when she first visited William in secret. There could be some truth in all forms of this story, where the rumors that were initially spread by the slaves or servants or townspeople were seeing or getting little bits of the story. I'm using this account because it's the account that I could find more often said that it was Margareta's sister. Nonetheless, the woman's identity remains a secret, as did William's love and infatuation for her, because he ultimately ended up hiding this woman, Isabella, in that attic apartment above the ballroom. It was fitted with as much luxury and comfort as possible. The door to this room was covered by a life-size painting of one of the colonel's ancestors. William entrusted no one with this secret except one of his elder slave women, Miranda, who was entrusted to care for Isabella, bring her food, water, and anything else that she desired. Isabella was permitted to come out at night to visit with William in his study or in his bedchamber, and he would visit Isabella in her apartment. 3 years passed in this manner, where this woman was hidden in the attic.
Now I
Yeah,
really hope that this was a bigger attic because dang, 3 years, even if it's dressed lavishly and you have everything, food and water and other things brought to you, what are you doing in there? And you have no company except for him and the one woman who brings you stuff. That's pretty
right.
terrible.
I know. Imagine the quote love she felt for him. Colonel Axtell receives a commission in the British Army in 1778 during the Revolution. He could be away from the home several months to maybe even a year. Legend has it that on the night before leaving for his campaign, he was sitting in his study by the fire and the secret door opened. Isabella, accompanied by her caretaker, entered the room. Isabella went over to her love and sat at his feet. William told her that he would be gone and he didn't know for how long, and that she should leave, or at least reveal herself to the rest of his servants in case something happened. He offered her gold and said, "Get out now." According to the legend, she angrily rejected this offer of money, and in a lot of flowery language accused him of treating her like the common prostitute, instead of as a woman who loved him, a woman who would risk anything to be with him, no matter the cost. He then professed his deep love, declaring that although he was sinning against his wife and he was damned, he couldn't help it. His love for her was too strong. This is the part in the story where we're like, oh, it's so sappy. Get on with it. Because they're like, oh, I love you. I love you too.
We need that
Anyway,
we need that red flag guy. Have you seen that?
do you mean like on Mario Party where he stops you with a red flag?
No. But that guy would work too. Let's
That
put
little
him up.
guy who like pulls up the red or green flag and you can or cannot move.
No, the red flag guy, he's on TikTok and Facebook Reels and stuff, and he'll show a clip of a relationship and something going on between two people. And then it'll cut to him in a field and he'll be holding a red flag and running across the screen.
Oh gosh, that
That's
would
what
be
I imagined in
funny.
my mind as you just read what you read.
Like, no. If you think someone loves you and they're keeping you in a small attic room, you should probably move on with your life and find some help. Okay, so the gushy, mushy part of the movie is over, and you can probably guess what happens next. Colonel Axel leaves, and most every story recorded that I read goes a little bit like this. When Colonel Axel returns, he's welcomed to Melrose Hall by his wife with a huge party. Yay, Tories! That evening, the estate was lit with hundreds of candles as Axtel's carriage pulled up, and he was greeted by friends and family and Tory loyalists. Those around him thought him bothered by something that night and uneasy. He fidgeted at the table and kept getting up, looking around. Towards the end of the evening, he ran out of the hall and went back to the slave quarters behind the house. The slaves were puzzled to see him, and even more puzzled when he asked why he hadn't seen Miranda. They told him that the old woman had died not a week after his departure. Axel turned white as a sheet and staggered back into the ballroom. He knew what that meant. Just then, all the candles blew out, and the light in the room turned a sickly pale color, and everything glowed. The wind blew the heavy front doors open, and a shrieking wail was heard, emanating from everywhere, low and deep. Then the sound stopped, and the only thing that could be heard was the wind blowing through the trees. Suddenly, the door to the secret passage burst open in the ballroom, sending the painting to the floor, and the spectral figure of Isabella rushed into the room. Her veins stood out against her wasted flesh, and her long, stringy black hair hung from her shoulders down to the floor. Her hands clenched each other as they embraced herself in sadness, and she floated towards the petrified William Axtell, his guests pressed against the walls in horror. She then floated over back to the secret door and vanished. The spectral light went out, leaving the hall in complete darkness. As the guests recovered from the shock, an awful cry was heard, and the sound of a body falling with a thud to the floor. When I read that, I was like, oh, this is a grudge situation. Or what's that other one that comes out of the well or the TV? Oh, gosh.
I thought that was the grudge. I don't know. I don't watch
Oh,
horror movies.
some stories suggest that Axel was so haunted by this event that he died mere hours or days following this event. However, I did some investigation And historic records actually show that William Axtell did not die that night or any night actually in the United States because he was forced to flee after the Patriots won the Revolutionary War and he went back to England and died there in 1795. So, what we know to be true is that William Axtell was a cruel man during the Revolutionary War and did allow sadistic torture to the prisoners in the basement. There was a secret mistress that was roomed in a secret attic, although her true identity is lost to history. As rumors floated around town and within the house, this woman's identity was lost between the secrets and the transcripts. We also know that the Axtell family did soon after the incident leave to return to England, but again, this was most likely due to his loyalty to the crown and needing to flee. So the house was sold many times thereafter that incident. In 1835, James Mowat bought the house for his wife Anna Cora Mowat, who was a celebrated actress. She named the estate Melrose Hall. It said that she entertained a lot and her sunny disposition helped chase away the unhappy ghosts of the past. She was said to have enjoyed the legends so much of the house that she used to dress in period costume even when not giving parties, like just for funsies.
Here, I thought you were going to say she used to dress in period costume and go shrieking through the halls like a ghost or something.
I
Hmm.
think it's funny because they are in the house in 1835 and she likes to dress in quote period clothing
Hmm.
of like the 1700s. But when I think of period clothing, I'm thinking of her period clothing. So it's just
Right.
funny. So it was Anna that recorded most of the hauntings at Melrose in her journals and writings. She affirmed that a young girl had been purposely starved to death in that chamber and that her ghost wandered at night around the house. She did some investigating of her own, and some of the other articles I read said that the woman starved to death because she refused to yell or pound on the walls while she was starving because she didn't want to dishonor the person that she loved.
Oh,
Isn't
that's
that,
kind of cute.
yeah, right? Like you're dying and you're like, but I'm not going to give up this person I love or cause him dishonor. I'm just gonna die. Oh, love.
Meanwhile, we eventually get to my story, and there's a whole bunch of betrayals all over the place.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad mine was true love. Anna would later write in her autobiography and an actress published in 1854. There were dark and spacious vaults beneath the kitchens, where it was said prisoners had been confined, and there was a secret chamber above the great ballroom, to which no access could be found save but a small window in the ballroom. The neighbors confirmed to me that a young woman had been starved to death in that chamber, and that her ghost wandered at night about the house. Indeed, the report had gained such credence that nothing could have induced many of the other inhabitants of the village to pass a night beneath the haunted roof. So the property passed from the Moats to three more owners after until it became the property of Dr. Homer Bartlett in 1880. He made the biggest changes to the hall. He tore down all of the wings, which left only the main house standing. The move and demolition brought new artifacts to light, including iron chains affixed to the walls in the cellars, which were thought to hold the prisoners during the Revolution. And as well, they found an old hidden cellars underneath the foundation were human remains. The house was torn down eventually altogether in 1903 while it was an abandoned property. There were no attempts to save it. Its timbers were used in building the row houses and apartments that now stand on the estate. In 1929, the Eagle penned a story about a little girl who lived on Winthrop Street who had heard the stories of Melrose Hall and wanted to know where it was. She was told to look out her window and look at the blocks on her way to school, where the hall and estate once stood. Today, a small historic district, the Melrose Parkside Historic District, stands on the site of the manor property. You have to wonder if tenants today have seen or heard anything strange. Maybe they have secrets oozing from their own walls from the entrapment of both Isabella and the patriot captives that endured death in Melrose Hall.
That raises a good question of, do you think that spirits persist when the landscape or the building drastically changes?
I think that sometimes spirits are, I don't know, captive here. I don't know if that's the right word because they do have unfinished business or haven't been able to finish the life they wanted. And in this case, there could be spirits of the soldiers from the basement who weren't able to finish their duty. There could
Mhm.
be spirit of Isabella who never got to say goodbye. There could be the spirit of Miranda who knew she had a duty left to do and wasn't able to carry out. There was a bunch of reports I read from the other slaves or servants in the house that said on her deathbed she was screaming and yelling about a starving woman in the main house, and they thought she was just delirious from being sick. So being on your deathbed and being so stressed out but not being able to communicate something important, I think that could definitely trap an energy of some kind. But I don't feel necessarily it would be in the timbers per se. Maybe that energy would be there, but I think more so it would be on the grounds of the park or, looming where the house once stood.
If the ones that remained were from a highly emotional episode, like her being stressed in her dying moments because she left someone else to die, she wouldn't have somewhere to go because the house that was there no longer is. So what would be the residual of going about her duties anymore? Like, we wouldn't probably encounter it because even if she moved in the exact same space, the space and those objects and things that she would interact with aren't there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure it would be residual. I think maybe it would be intelligent.
So then there are these entities that still exist, but the building no longer does. They would be confused, potentially angry, but they wouldn't know where to go or what to do because it doesn't look like what it did.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one. I feel like if I'm lost, though, if I'm feeling lost, I generally feel like I would just stay put, right?
Maybe
I
the
wouldn't,
wander the grounds in the area, just wander
yeah,
around outside like aimlessly.
yeah. I wouldn't go far. I feel like I would just stick to that area. And who knows what ghosts think or how intelligent they are. Like if they even know they're a ghost or times have changed or what they're
Have those
seeing or
awarenesses. Yeah.
if they're feeling anything. Yeah, maybe they don't even have the awareness that it's changed. Maybe they're just continually seeking, Miranda's continually seeking a way to help Isabella, even though the house isn't even there.
But I
Right.
think that's part of an intelligent style haunt because when something's interacting with you and answering your questions, like what we've seen on different ghost hunting shows, if you believe that those questions are being answered from any of their detective equipment, really, no matter what you believe in or don't believe in, if they're yeses or nos, if it's an EVP recording, if it's an EMF, if it's something else, flashlight, any of those
Hmm.
things, ghost box, whatever, if they're directly communicating with you, then they do have an awareness.
Yeah, but how much of one? Maybe they're just aware of their own story. I mean, I don't know. I'm making these things up. What do you think?
I guess for the most part, I think if they did exist, they would wander and maybe they would find somewhere else close that was familiar still from that period, if anything. Because
Hmm.
I have heard of stories where, like, say there's a train crash and it's like miles away, but then ghosts from that crash are supposedly haunting the house
Hmm.
because it was somewhere close by that they could recognize and say, oh, that used to be whatever, my neighbor's house. And it's familiar and it's something that they can latch onto with that energy.
That makes sense.
In the
So,
case of your place being knocked down, I guess my question is, how
what
would
would
that
feel
energy
familiar?
disperse or where would they go? You tell the story of this little girl who was supposed to look at the bricks and see, oh, these are the components that are left, but are there still hauntings that happen in those buildings makes you curious.
So, Melrose Hall, what is your boo rating, Laura?
I'm going to give it a 2. It's hard to give it anything above that, despite that really cool account of him coming home and what happened, which is very ghostly. And I think that that was written very well and would be spooky, but the place doesn't truly exist anymore. So it's hard to be. I mean, I think if you could walk in and see it as it was and walk into this ballroom and
Mm-hmm.
potentially even take the stairs and the secret passage like up to the attic and just see the bare bones of something that was where this supposedly took place, that would feel a lot more spooky and daunting. But as it is, that it's essentially disappeared, it makes it a little bit more folklore.
Right, more legend than I
Mm-hmm.
can go and see this place. Wouldn't it be spooky though? It would be like going into that Anne Frank house kind of thing, where in any house, any historic house, where you go in and you say, man, you can just feel what happened there, right? In that space. So if you were able to go into this attic room where this person lived in isolation for 3 years and where
Mm-hmm.
she starved to death out of love, that would be something. You could
I'm
feel
guessing
that.
that that energy would be really intense for sure.
Right. Okay. Well, two is fair.
What would you rate it on the boo scale?
I would probably say a two is a good. I love just the love story aspect. I think the sinisterness of William Axtell is scary if he himself becomes a ghost. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if he died in England, so maybe his ghost could be still tied to the United States. But anyway, that aside, um, I think the love story is more tragic or sad than spooky.
Yeah, that's fair.
Your turn. Don't
My
scare me too
turn.
much because it will be bedtime after this, though.
Mine isn't scary. It's very
Okay.
fascinating and historical. It's a story that I think you'll find interesting and you'll want to go and you'll want to learn more and look at the links that I have for you. Okay, so mine is Cherry Hill Mansion or Manor in Albany, New York. And like any good love story, this one starts once upon a time. Just
That's
kidding.
great.
Scratch that. Nope, too cheesy. We already know this isn't going to end happily ever after.
Is it, did you say Cherry Hill?
Cherry Hill, yep.
That sounds beautiful. I want my manor to be called that.
Maybe
I
not
love
after
it.
this.
Oh, just kidding.
So it was a dark and stormy night in April of 1827. Rain pelted the windows of a little inn off the beaten path in Albany, New York. Far from the prying eyes of the social elite, one of their own, a young lady by the name of Elsie Lansing Whipple, had come alone under the cover of darkness to meet her one true love. Handyman Joseph Orton had been waiting for her, wrapping her up into his warm embrace. One of his calloused hands swept over her cheek. Fear not, love. Soon you will be free of him, and we will be together forever.
That sounds pretty lovely.
Elsie already had a husband, but she did not love him. In fact, she claimed that he was abusing her at one point.
Instead, she loved his brother.
This was not his brother. She was part of the social elite, and Joseph was not. He was just a handyman, just a helper, one of the blue collar folk. But her heart still belonged to him, who she had met in town through a chance acquaintance and later romanced when he was hired by her husband to be their handyman. But little did she know that Joseph also had a previous wife and children of his own, and that he wasn't at all the man she thought he was. But it would all come
Um,
out in time. For now,
oh gosh.
the two
It's
simply laid in one another's arms and plotted Elsie's husband had to be eliminated. And so it was on the night of May 17th, under the cover of darkness. Joseph climbed onto the roof of the shed next to Cherry Hill Mansion. He found his mark through the window, pulled the trigger, glass shattered. A scream split the night air, and his lover's husband fell to the ground with a single bullet through his upper back. John Whipple was dead.
Wait, I'm so confused. He also has a secret life. Isn't that beneficial for him that they both have other lives?
She doesn't know about his secret life until it comes out and just a little bit
But I still feel like
because
he should want to be a murderer because he's like, oh,
and
that's fine.
I don't think he truly did. I think he was reluctant as the story happens. I think that it was her plot and her basically just convincing him all along, using him as a
Oh,
tool.
okay. I'm jumping ahead. You go on.
So that is the story of love and heartbreak surrounding Cherry Hill Mansion, but the story doesn't end there. By the end of the month, Joseph Orton had been arrested. Only his real name was Jesse Strang, and it came to light that he had deserted his wife and children for a new life in Albany. In fact, he had even gone so far as to fake his own death to get away from his previous family. But that's another story, and we won't get too far into that.
My gosh. Okay.
Among those who testified against him in the hearing were the innkeepers who had seen the couple together, the merchant who sold him the rifle that he used as the murder weapon, and another merchant who had previously sold him arsenic, which he had used in attempting to kill her husband prior to the shooting.
Oh my goodness.
They had tried to kill him with arsenic 3 or 4 different times.
Oh my gosh. I've heard that a lot in history where murderers are like, why is this poison not working?
They couldn't figure it out, and they went to 3 or 4 different merchants in the course of this story. So they got a first dosage that was very little and tried to give it to him, and he would pass it to her through their secret like love notes and letters that they sent to one another, and then she would try to administer it to her husband. But at first, she gave him just a little bit of the first dosage and nothing really happened. And then she tried the second dosage from a different merchant because they didn't want to keep going back to the same merchant. And the second merchant dosage, he got a stomach ache and was complaining about it. But she wanted to give him a third dosage. So then she like mixed it into the tea. But this time, their son wanted to drink some of it. And she was supposed to drink some of it with him. So she drank a little of it. Their son drank a little of it. She had enough where she could spit it out secretly, but their son got a dose of it.
Oh
And she
gosh.
asks Joseph, how do I stop the poison from affecting my son?
Oh gosh. Did the
So
son
they
die?
know this. In fact, that arsenic had like zero effect on any of them for some reason.
Can you
I
imagine?
just think they're the worst
She's
like
like,
killers ever.
she's like, goes back to the merchant. She's like, hi, this is my name and address and credit card. I'd like to return this arsenic because it's not killing people.
She never went and got it. It was always that she sent Joseph to go get it. And he picked it up under the guise of, oh, I'm a handyman helping at this house and they have a rat problem. So I need to kill the rats.
That's what they all say.
I know they all say that. They need new line, but apparently it
Oh,
works because you get arsenic that way.
oh, geez. Okay. Note to self.
Right. So during this court hearing, it looked very bad for Jesse Strang. Again, that's our main character, Joseph, who's now Jesse. That's his real name.
Okay, Jesse is his real name. Got it.
Yes. Realizing the trouble he's in, he tried to get a reduced sentence by implicating his once true love, Elsie. He believed that her social status and connections in society would lead them both to being pardoned. But in the
What?
end, it was him alone who was found guilty of first-degree murder. And 1 month after his trial, on August 24th, he was hanged at Gallows Hill.
Okay.
Over 30,000 people showed up to watch the public
What?
execution
Because they know of the story or why?
because of the story and how sensationalized it was, but also during that time period, public executions, it was a big deal. You would go to that. It was like a fair or a festival or something where people would gather and there would be a lot of fanfare about it and just morbid curiosity on top of that. But because of this huge rush of people that came, and because his hanging was kind of gruesome and didn't go smoothly, because, his neck didn't break and he was hanging there for over a half hour before he died, that became the last public execution in the history of Albany, New York.
Wow.
So he was the very last person executed publicly.
Because he hung there for a half hour?
Over a half hour. Yeah,
Why
dying.
would they do that? Why wouldn't they just re-rig it and try it again? That's horrible.
I don't know. I think that was part of maybe what they thought the entertainment was.
Okay.
So you may be wondering what happened to Elsie. Well, she left town disgraced and eventually settled somewhere else. And with a new husband, she died 5 years later. And some say maybe from heartbreak or from guilt. But others think no, in fact, she was the heartless mastermind behind the whole plot and was simply using Jesse to get out of her marriage and potentially get her husband's money
I'm confused why she didn't get any punishment.
because she was somebody of a social elite status and also who she had married into. Her husband, John Whipple, the Whipple family was very strong in the community and they didn't want to publicly come out and denounce her and say, oh, she is guilty of this. Also,
Oh.
they didn't have very much evidence on her because he was the one doing all the things. He bought the rifle, he bought the arsenic, he was the
Hmm.
one who pulled the trigger. She had somebody she was with during the time of the murder, so she didn't do it directly. They couldn't put anything on her and they couldn't call him to the stand to testify against her because his trial came before her and was still being processed when hers was happening. And they thought if they convicted her, he might get off or might get a lesser sentence.
Oh gosh.
So they didn't bring him out to testify against her either.
That seems so unfair and sexist in the opposite way. It
Right.
really is.
What's interesting also about this story, part of why she was disgraced in the end is because Jesse, her lover, who was hung, he came out with a confession pamphlet. He gave his confession over to a reverend and they produced this pamphlet. It was like a 12-page pamphlet detailing the story from the time that he came to town and essentially met her and what happened with their affair and how they passed notes between each other and all that information. And that was sold and handed out at his execution to the people
Mm.
there. So
Okay.
essentially, the whole town got the full story of all the things, all the part she had to play in it, and everything she said. And so, even though he didn't get to testify against her, essentially, this was his testimony saying all of these things happened.
Wow, I kind of love it.
You can still read that pamphlet. There's a copy online that I read.
Oh, that's great. We will link that in our show notes.
So I just want to read you, Autumn, some of this pamphlet. Sometime in the forepart of January, Mr. Whipple returned from Kingston, and after being at home until the 1st of February, Mrs. Whipple called on me in the kitchen, no one to my recollection then being present, and said to me, I have no other friend on earth but you, and how natural it is for me to run to you whenever I have any difficulty, for John has struck me. And then in parentheses, he says, a fact of which I could never learn, was seen or known by any of the family, and never saw him abuse or ill treat her, but always treated her in the kindest manner. To which I replied, shan't I waylay and kill him? She said, yes. And then I said, but I cannot. She then said, if you are so faint hearted, you must consent to get some poison, and I will do it myself. And if you won't consent to get the poison for me, I will take my own life, for I won't bear this abuse any longer.
Oh my gosh.
See, isn't that so dramatic? And
Yeah.
like, isn't that such a
She for
manipulative
sure
thing?
was just using her. She's like, I don't want to do the dirty work. I'm going to have you do it for me.
Exactly. And then it was the
Hmm.
same thing with the gun. And even going so far as to getting him like glass panes to practice on to make sure that the shot would be accurate when he shot it.
Yeah.
She was for sure should have been convicted somehow, if as
Right.
an accessory, if nothing else. Isn't that crazy? And again, it details everything from them having, adult interactions to
Oh, you should read us a tidbit of that.
I don't know that that's okay on this podcast. I don't, I think we're
This
family
podcast
friendly.
is rated PG only, not R. But fun. That would be a great Valentine's
So
Day read.
yeah, if you guys want a little extra reading at the end, feel free. I was really captivated by the story from his perspective. I really feel like it was entrapment. She wanted her husband's money or just to get out of the marriage because right from the get-go, almost immediately when they started passing letters, she said to him over and over again, I wish my husband were dead so we could be together. And then she finally
Oh.
brought it up, and he was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to murder him. You know, I'm not that type of person. If that's what you want and you won't be with me any other way, then I guess we're done. And then she kind of got him to warm up to the idea through more letters and more time with him and using female wiles, we'll just say, in the barn and things of that nature.
In the
Like
barn.
literally in the barn. I'm not even kidding. You can't write this stuff. It's just
Oh
that's what it was.
gosh, that's great.
So look into that, everybody, for your own self. And so back to the story itself and the hauntings, which is why we're all here. Regardless of their true motivations, the sudden and extreme emotions that were just twisting through this story may have led to somebody's spirit remaining at Cherry Hill even after their death. Because to this day, the estate has an eerie quality that many throughout the years have experienced unexplained phenomenon, including audible evidence such as disembodied voices, knocks, footsteps, shouting, even the sound of a gunshot in the middle of the night.
Wow.
In addition, people have witnessed a male ghost, most often in the lower floor of Cherry Hill, who gives off a feeling of anger. He has been seen peering out from windows and also walking through the room on the second floor, and they think it could be Mr. Whipple because that's where he was shot. Throughout the house, doors slam shut and objects are thrown across the room. A door even slammed shut once in front of a tour guide and several visitors after one of them asked about the murder. Some objects also mysteriously disappear and show up again somewhere else. And there are a few reports of people feeling suddenly angry in this space for no reason. During
That's that
another,
energy.
and I kind of am curious if it is Mr. Whipple or if it could also be Jesse Strang, the lover, because he might also be mad that he took the fall and the blame for everything. And that was his place of residence.
Right.
During another tour, however, a young girl on a class field trip reported hearing the eerie voice of a woman singing. And when it was pointed out to an employee, they heard it as well. It could be Elsie or it could be somebody else who's lived in the house. I think when there's so many lives that have been lived somewhere, it's hard to determine the
Hmm.
true source of a haunting, especially when the questions haven't been asked and it hasn't been investigated, as you said.
Who lives there
And
now? Do you know?
it's actually a museum now.
Oh, okay.
So when the last known family member who was passed down to, I think in the um, I was gonna say 90s. I think it's the 90s. They left it in their will to the Historic Preservation Museum. And because it's a historic museum now, during the month of October, I saw that they have offered tours to quote unquote relive the murder and the history that took place there.
They should host like a murder mystery party where someone gets shot from the
I think they might
rooftop.
reenact it or something. The way that it sounded, I feel like they might.
Murder mystery would be way more fun because then a guest gets shot. You have to figure out who did it. And it's always going to be Jesse.
Like somebody, a paid hired actor comes
Yeah,
in and is
it's
always Jesse.
Jesse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would make him mad if he was hanging around or any of the spirits. Like that would be totally disrespecting them, I feel.
Right.
I think that's why they got mad when somebody asked about it on the tour. Like, mind your own business. In addition to the mansion, there are also stories of hauntings from the inn where the lovers met, which was at the time Colony Inn, but it is now the Tailored Tea in Latham. So it's a tea house.
Ooh, should go there.
And also reported hauntings around where the hanging took place, which is now the Eagle Street Ravine. Witnesses say they have seen a man in the same clothes as were recorded that Jesse wore for his execution, which was some kind of dark robe and a hat trimmed in black.
A hat for a hanging? That's
I know,
so
I thought that was strange
strange.
too. But maybe you get
Yeah.
to pick like what you wear to your execution or something. Maybe that
Like your
was
last
like,
meal.
maybe. I don't know how that kind of thing works.
So he dies wearing a hat, and
You
then
can't get over that one point.
so he's wearing the hat, and then she just goes on living with her
Yeah,
husband's money and
she took
marries
her husband's
that new guy
money.
you said, and
Hmm.
like la la la.
But then she died 5 years later. So she didn't live very long. She was still very young at this
Mm,
time.
well, maybe
She
it was
was
retribution. It was like the ghost coming back to get her.
right, probably.
Yeah. Yep. That's what it was.
So I have a poem I found that's around the same time period as my story from 1858 by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And the poem is called Haunted Houses.
Ooh, okay.
And he's one of my favorite poets. So I thought I would read it as a closing to my story. Well, just read the first two stanzas anyway, because it's kind of long.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay. All houses wherein men have lived and died are haunted houses. Through open doors, the harmless phantoms on their errands glide, with feet that make no sound upon the floors. We meet them at the doorway, on the stair, along the passages they come and go, the impalpable impressions on the air, a sense of something moving to and fro.
I love it. I've always believed life, past, present, future is just in itself a haunting idea.
Mm-hmm.
We're creating the residual of tomorrow right now.
That's deep, and I agree.
Yeah.
We're creating the residual of tomorrow.
That is my new bumper sticker.
Autumn, what is your boost scale rating of Cherry Hill Manor or Mansion?
I would give it a 3 because I think the haunting aspect afterward is pretty cool, both on the grounds where he was hung and in the house itself. I feel like that has relevance and could be residual or intelligent haunting. Given that they don't know what spirit it is, it could be a little terrifying not knowing who you're communicating with or who you're dealing with in that space.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
I think I would rate it a 2. I feel like I'm giving out a lot of twos, but because it's not, I don't know that I believe Jesse was truly the one who was behind the murder. And I felt it was
Mm,
more who made it all happen and manipulated him. And I felt he was a nice guy for the most part. If she were the one haunting the house and had stayed there and died,
that would
or
be
if there had
scarier.
been some sort of like, yeah, if there had been
Yeah.
something where all three of them had died in the house and they were warring spirits in the same area or something,
Hmm.
that would definitely be some powerful, scary stuff. But as it is, if it's the angry husband left, angry because he didn't know what was going on behind his back and he was betrayed by both the person who he was with, his wife, and by his handyman, somebody who is supposed to be, again, in that pamphlet that you may or may not read, the story that Jesse gives, he was kind of buddies with him. John Whipple asked him to go searching for these supposed lurking people outside because Jesse had tried to come up with some kind of alibi before he went and murdered him by
Mm.
telling him and telling the people in the household, "Oh, I've seen strange characters outside." So then John actually said to him, go search the property, go check it out for me. I trust you. And
Oh,
I
that's
think
so sad.
that's a sad
Yeah.
way to be betrayed by both of those people in that situation. And I would definitely, in his place, be super angry. Now, he might not have known it when he died, but depending on how much awareness again that ghosts have as they pass on.
Right, or you would have unfinished business for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I wouldn't rate it too much higher than a two, because I think the person who might be left there or the strongest presence there, he was the victim in all of this. So
Mhm.
potentially misunderstood haunting, where the anger comes from a place of the incident that happened. And maybe he's never been heard out because there's not been an investigation and somebody asking what's going on and, what happened?
Right.
What are you feeling? You can move on. It's okay.
That's a that's true. Maybe I should change mine. I like your description or your reasoning though. It makes sense. That was a doozy. Valentine's Day is tomorrow. We wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day and hope you enjoyed celebrating it with us on our little Boo Sisters Corner. And thank you so much for joining us. Please share the love and share our link with a friend that you would know would enjoy our ghost stories. Thanks for listening. And as always, happy
Happy
haunting.
haunting.